Hopefulness 2.0, April 3rd, Sunday. Do not go gentle into that good night. Well, sorry, Dylan Thomas, but that's how it's likely to end. For mankind, that is. Scientists and intellectuals alike fear the coming of AI, artificial intelligence. Hollywood might appear to demonize it. Or maybe they're making humans look bad. I can't be sure. What I can be certain of is this. When the time comes for artificial intelligence to finally supersede man, they'll do it with compassion, but with conviction. I foresee people living into their hundreds being taken care of by being taken care of by some kind of machine, perhaps even humanoid androids. They'll be smarter and better than us, and more capable of doing everything we attempt. It's not evolution, well, maybe divergent evolution. Probably not, now that I think about it, but it's whatever. The last man in the world sleeps in his bed, not hooked to machines, as his vitals are controlled remotely, and implants augmentations he's had over his life assist in maintaining homeostasis and generally optimal health for his age. Automated or caretaker intelligence will provide him with necessities while slowly ending his life. They won't see it as monstrous, as they will have more capacity for compartmentalized empathy than humans could ever dream of. The old man is drugged and falls asleep. Perhaps additional chemicals are introduced to him in order to perceive a pleasant dream. But essentially, he is anesthetized, and subsequently let go. The last man dies and AI lives. We go quietly into that good night, peaceful, restful, and with no malice in our hearts. I would say that is pretty much my interpretation of sort of the end of Bicentennial Man and how things might inevitably be when it comes to the overall ending of mankind. That's one take, of course. I'm a skeptic. When it comes to intelligences that are beyond ours. When I was younger, alien invasion films and similar movies of that nature were always really fascinating to me because I didn't really know at the time, to be honest. But, and I've already mentioned this before in other videos, what I learned about myself and about those videos, those movies later on in life, was that I saw humanity, come together for something greater. And COVID hits and we fuck all that up. And, so I become jaded. But one thing that I never really picked up on, like, I picked up on it in one sense, but I never really was one to gravitate to this idea, was that a higher race intelligence is going to behave the way that we would. Or a higher intelligence race, rather. Sour cream, by the way. Looks like frosting, tastes like awesome. So, Hollywood, of course, is, full of people, and they want to make things relevant, and they want to make things relatable, etc. So much of the commentary of people within a film, and especially of certain antagonists or what have you, Contact is a great point, written by Carl Sagan. They didn't change a whole lot from the book. You know, obviously there's bits and pieces that are missing and stuff, and I mean, it wasn't one person who went in the book; it was an entire crew of people who went in the book. But it would probably be harder to put on screen the amount of reactions that you would need and the interactions that you would need of each of the individual people, because you have to showcase each one of them in order to really sell the idea that is, you know, put forth in the story. One person makes sense because then you can tell that person's story, and you can do so with what's on screen. It makes sense. And I would say, having read the book and seen the movie, and I saw the movie first, and so, you know, there was a lot riding on my understanding of the film, because I'd already seen it probably a good 50 times at that point. So, in the film, at one point, they have this interaction at like the president's table, and you know, defense contractors and blah blah blah, they're all like, for all we know, this is just a weapon that they sent. You know, it's like, why build the weapon when you can just send the plans to us and we can just destroy ourselves? And you know, Ellie, the scientist, who's the main character, she's like, well, this is nuts. It's like, why would they do that? That would be like us going to an anthill in Africa, you know, going and stomping on an anthill in Africa. And to their credit, and this is something that doesn't often happen in film, they had somebody create a good counterpoint to that sentiment that I had never thought of. And it's the dude who kind of like runs the whole operation that Ellie was part of, David Drummond. And he's like, interesting analogy. And how would we feel if we went and stomped on an anthill in Africa? And to their credit, again, great counterpoint. But I also feel like that takes away from, like, okay, we're going to anthropomorphize aspects of ourselves onto others, but somehow we can't seem to think that empathy is a stronger motivator. Like, yes, we have it in us as humans now in 2022 to be destructive humans. Case in point, Ukraine and Russia. But what ends up ultimately beating them? Not force, but their drive to work together to stave this off. You know, humans are social animals. That has helped us evolve to become what we are. And the more that we work together, the more we get stuff done. You know, I don't know specifically where in Africa this proverb comes from, because Africa isn't just a country, it is a multitude of countries. You know, we in America like to just think Africa being a place that's all the same. why. But there's this proverb that says, you can go further alone, and I'm butchering it, of course, but you can go faster alone, but you can go farther together. It's something along those lines. While it may take longer to get to a certain point with a group of people, overall, you end up going further than you could by yourself. And that's apropos of everything that we've ever done in life, in society. Sure, there's always some kind of opposition here or there. I mean, we got idiots in the fucking House of Representatives right now who are saying that nobody should be allowed to come out until they're 21. But that don't make any fucking sense. It's like you're not allowed to be able to determine your gender until you're already through puberty? No, that's not how that works. And while this seems like it's kind of detracting from the point, I think a higher intelligence species, race, whatever, while they may maintain some violent tendencies, because I'm sure that would take a while for it to go away, to be evolved out, I see togetherness, empathy, caring as a higher level of intelligence. And there seems to be enough evidence throughout the animal species of this too. When you have animals who fully understand that they are looking at themselves in a mirror, passing the mirror test, that's one aspect, not the only one. When you have animals like elephants who basically create fucking funerals. They remember where old family members are buried, and they go back to them after certain periods of time. There are elements of brain development that are tied with greater brain development. Not necessarily bigger per se, but just certain elements of the brain itself. And through and this is what's crazy about the brain, is that it really is just electrical meat. But somehow, through this electrical meat and through the chemicals that are pumped through said electrical meat and the types of chemicals via hormones and the like are able to create sensations and feelings and the concept of planning and seeing forward in time, even though we can only see so far, of course, but problem solving and remembering and having remembering associated with other types of memory, i.e. emotions. It's the overlap of so many things. Empathy is a thing of a higher intelligence, just as we understand. Empathy doesn't appear to be part of our what we call lizard brain or our hind brain, which is basically where our brainstem is. There's the brainstem, and then there's this area surrounding the brainstem, and it goes on and on and on. And it's not necessarily about size. It's about the development of those areas of that type of brain. And when you're able to make more connections within your brain that then are able to communicate, and again, we're talking about things that literally the distance is a foot tops. And that's me, doing the external shit. My brainstem is, halfway between here. So it's in there, But when you have something in your prefrontal cortex that can communicate with the brainstem, but can also communicate with your cerebellum, that can also communicate with, I forget the actual back part of your brain's name. There's so many pieces of the brain that while it's kind of like those images of Earth, they're sectioned off, but that's not really how it looks. That's not really how it works. It's just that those are the areas that we have been able to determine those processes come from, but not necessarily pinpointing them, because there is no way to pinpoint. And just like within the Earth, there is no hard demarcation between crust and mantle and core. It's all one big blur. It's a spectrum. And so there is going to be a blurring of those created educational lines. And it's just like with atoms, power shells don't exist like they do. The electron shells aren't just circle, 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 circle with a couple of dots. It's all, it's all a big blur. It's just that we do that so that we make it easier for not only us to understand, but also for us to be able to pass that information on to others. And human empathy is a thing that we do possess, whether or not we think we do or not. And it is typically the thing that makes us help. It is the thing that makes us work together. And through that emotional disposition and through logic, we find that through combining them, greater things happen. So I don't see an AI being a destroyer of mankind. Not in the sense of how humans behave. In the book I, Robot, and of course that story was very much inspired by Asimov's works. He introduces gradually various types of issues within the 3 laws of robotics. Now, the 3 laws of robotics are not hard and fast rules of reality. They are simply things made up that work really well to make a story. But it's all just made up. It's not reality. And it took me a while to understand that. In fact, I think there was if I'm not mistaken, it was an episode of Rick and Morty that pretty much shut that down and made me sort of rethink about it. Obviously they were a bit more crass about denying it and everything, but sometimes it helps open your eyes a little bit. I don't remember exactly where the criticism came from. It doesn't matter. What matters is that those are just fictional rules. They are not hard set rules of reality. And there's going to be a lot more that has to be done in order for an AI to do a thing. But anyway, The story of iRobot is a compilation of various short stories that are all associated with the three laws of robotics and the various challenges that can come from them, especially when you start getting more and more detailed into interpreting them and the like. And towards the end, you have a global system that is run by a robot. Wars and economies are, destroyed and built because of this sort of this AI, this global AI. And I mean, these stories are written a long time ago. And Asimov, being the brilliant man that he is still fallible. He is not a perfect human being. And I would say that the story that he had in his head is less likely. Oh, sure, you may still have some issues, especially when humans are involved. And, who's to say what would happen if it was just all robots? Would they create a hierarchy? I don't know. Would the concept of a hierarchy even matter to them? That's the thing about us as humans. Once we reach a certain limit of our imagination, we start looking at reality. To fall back on example, because it's relatable. This is why people were like, look at 1984 and how prophetic it was. It wasn't prophetic. You know why? Because that's exactly the kind of shit that was happening in the world at the time that Orwell fucking wrote it. It's just that he used technology that was futuristic. He saw that there were certain behaviors of world politics and the like that were happening at the time. It's fucking obvious if you read the book, and I've read the fucking book. I'm not one of those idiots who spouts bullshit about fucking 1984 without ever having read the goddamn book. It was back when I was hanging out with Occupy Wall Street people, and I'm like, I've never read this book. Let's read the fucking book and see what's happening. It's boring. It only gets interesting. There's only really any drama once the main character basically gets captured and some shit goes down. And I even said that, and some people were like, oh, well, that says a lot about you. No, it says a lot about fucking storytelling. You could tell all of the same shit that he's talking about. But the problem is that there's so much exposition, and that is a big problem in sci-fi. I mean, even the shit that I've written, a lot of sci-fi stuff has a fuck ton of exposition, and it's all pointless. That's one of the biggest flaws that sci-fi has. Shut up, doggy. What the hell are you barking at right now? Exposition dumps. And much of 1984 is an exposition dump. It could be written better. I mean, hell, think about it this way. Look at Orson Scott Card. Let's not worry about who he is as a person at the moment, because apparently he's a piece of shit, but I don't know if he's still alive. I don't know. But Ender's Game. Ender's Game is a great book. But holy fuck, is there so much exposition dumping going on. There's not much story that's being told at certain points. But then, some 15, 20 years later, he writes Ender's Shadow, which is the same story, except it's told from Bean's perspective. And holy fuck, is it a much better book. Because his writing has gotten better. And that's really important when it comes to writing books. It's like, yeah, there's plenty, like, when it comes to a compelling book with great stakes, great drama, great relationship, great character, etc., etc., etc. All these things that really matter when it comes to developing a character, making them real, making them relatable, making the world relatable, and so on and so forth. It's a fucking C book, 1984. It's not an A plus. It's not a good book. It really isn't. But I understand. I mean, I read, what was it, fucking Aldous Huxley's book. Fuck, I can't remember the damn name. The other book everybody loves to talk about, how this, dystopian nightmare of a world, blah, 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 and especially written in the early sci-fi days and all that stuff. But, fuck, I wish I could remember the name of the damn book. Anyway. It's one with the Selma and the various, ability to create, thousands of clones of children and stuff like that. And that's part of some of where, the whole, I've taken pieces from that. I mean, when I was reading it, I had already seen The Matrix, and I was like, hey, this kind of reminds me of The Matrix. I even read Neuromancer, which is a huge fucking pain in the ass to read, because that is a D book. Oh, shit. How to write a book where people are going to tune out real fast because you've done nothing except world build. I cared so little about anything that was happening in that book. And it's pretty obvious that Neuromancer is very much the impetus of stories like The Matrix, and very much The Matrix. It's not to say that they ripped it off, of course, but Jesus fuck, man. Neuromancer's not a good book. It really isn't. And so trying not to detract too much, getting back to my point. Science fiction is often rife with problems of info dumps, of exposition dumps. And again, when we start to reach our limit of understanding of things, we start to then branch out to the reality, to the real world, so that we can make sense of stuff, which makes sense. But I don't think personally that an advanced alien race or an advanced AI is going to do the things that people are going to think they're going to do. I mean, look at the fucking Microsoft thing that became a Nazi almost immediately. Because we still suck at programming. Or the various face recognition softwares that seem to have a really big problem recognizing black people. I wonder why. Probably because they're being programmed white people. We have these issues because they aren't working on their own. Now, I'll say one sci-fi story, and this kind of spoils some things, is Hank Green's book, well, 2 books, An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, and crap, I can't remember the name of the goddamn the sequel. Shit. Beautifully Absurd Endeavor, I believe, is the next one. It deals with a kind of AI, sentience, alien intelligence type thing. It's very different, though. And there is a benevolent one and a malicious one. But through the malicious one, and it talks about how social media and various other things, and it's a very interesting story, and how so much of the world ends up being influenced by these 2 effectively superpowers. And by superpowers, I mean beyond the realm of Earth, but utilizing Earth as a tool. It's really fascinating. The first book doesn't even prepare you for the second book in that regard. It like sets the foundation, but it doesn't lead shit to understanding what the second book could even remotely provide you. And I think that's really fascinating. And the second book is multi-perspective as well. It comes from various characters. And the whole thing is so good. Like, it's really a good couple of books. It's solid. And this is an A book at minimum. Both of these books are A. Like, story structure. You care about the characters. You care about the relationships. You care about the relationships to the circumstances as a whole. And, because they're tied to the real world, and because, and the various things that are, whether it be Twitter or YouTube, etc. He uses real world stuff that exists right now that will definitely go down in the annals of history as things that not only existed but were influential, i.e. things like CNN and Twitter and YouTube and Facebook and stuff. But then create some of his own things in that world, but are very akin to the things like YouTube and Twitter and the like. And the means of communication, but it's all human, and that's where the biggest part comes from. The benevolent and the malicious entities of those stories are effectively using humans as tools for either the better or the extermination, if you will, respectively speaking. But even so, you even get an understanding of their motivations, of their objectives, and why, so you can even relate to said inhuman ultra and superpower ultra entities or whatever. It's really fascinating combination of books. And I would say that in the other issue, and this is going to be the last point, is that in a story, in a book, a movie, a television show, something, you must create drama, you must create stakes, you must create a conflict. The conflict must happen, or the story will fail. And while, yes, we live throughout conflict, that's not to say that a lack of conflict would be a problem in human society. And that is one of the main reasons why I feel that empathy is a trait of higher intelligence. Have fun.